The House will be in order. The chair lays before the House a communication from the Speaker.
The Speaker's Rooms, Washington, D.C., January 6, 2021. I hereby appoint the Honorable Eric Swalwell to act as Speaker pro tempore on this day. Signed, Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Today's prayer will be offered by Chaplain Kibben.
Would you pray with me? O God, our refuge and our strength, a very present help in times of discord and trouble. Mountains crumble and waters rage, nations roar, and yet we need not be afraid, for even now you abide with us in these times of great discord, uncertainty, and unrest. We who have pledged to defend our Constitution against all enemies, we pray your hedge of protection around this nation. Defend us from those adversaries, both foreign and domestic, outside these walls and perhaps within these chambers, who sow seeds of acrimony to divide colleagues and conspire to undermine trust in your divine authority over all things. The journey of this experiment in democracy is perilous and demanding, fraught with anger and discontent, but wise rulers still seek you. So help us, God, to find you in the midst of us. So help us, God, to see your gracious plan even in the events of these days. So help us, God, to serve you and this nation with godliness and dignity. We lay before you the gifts of our hopes, our dreams, our deliberations, and our debates, that you would be revealed and exalted among the people. We pray these things in the strength of your holy name. Amen.
Amen. Pursuant to Section 5A1A of House Resolution 8, the Journal of the Last Day's Proceedings is approved. The Pledge of Allegiance will be led by the gentleman from Kansas, Mr. Mann. To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Pursuant to Senate Concurrent Resolution 1 and the order of the House of January 4, 2021, the Chair announces the Speaker's appointment of 2 members as tellers on part of the House to count the electoral votes.
The gentlewoman from California, Ms. Zoe Lofgren, and the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Rodney Davis.
The Chair lays before the House a communication.
The Honorable the Speaker, House of Representatives, Madam, pursuant to the permission granted in Clause 2H of Rule 2 of the Rules of the U.S. House of Representatives, I have the honor to transmit a sealed envelope received from the White House on January 5, 2021 at 5:05 p.m., said to contain a message from the President regarding additional steps addressing the threat posed by applications and other software developed or controlled by Chinese companies. With best wishes, I am, signed sincerely, Cheryl L. Johnson, Clerk of the House.
The Clerk will report the message.
To the Congress of the United States, pursuant to the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, the National Emergencies Act, and Section 301 of Title III United States Code, I hereby report that I have issued an executive order declaring additional steps to be taken concerning the national emergency with respect to the information and communications technology and services supply chain declared in Executive Order 13873 of May 15, 2019, securing the information and communications technology and services supply chain to deal with the threat posed by applications and other software developed or controlled by Chinese companies. The pace and pervasiveness of the spread in the United States of certain connected mobile and desktop applications and other software developed or controlled by persons in the People's Republic of China, PRC, to include Hong Kong and Macau, China, continue to threaten the national security, foreign policy, and economy of the United States. By accessing personal electronic devices such as smartphones, tablets, and computers, Chinese connected software applications can access and capture vast swaths of information from users, including sensitive, personally identifiable information and private information. The continuing activity of the PRC and the Chinese Communist Party to steal or otherwise obtain United States persons' data makes clear that there is an intent to use bulk data collection to advance China's economic and national security agenda. To deal with this threat, additional steps are required against those who develop or control certain Chinese connected software applications to protect our national security. I have delegated to the Secretary, in consultation with the Secretary of the Treasury and the Attorney General, the authority to take such actions, including adopting appropriate rules and regulations and employing all other powers granted to the President by IEEPA as may be necessary to implement the executive order. The heads of all executive departments and agencies are directed to take all appropriate measures within their authority to implement the provisions of the executive order. I am enclosing a copy of the executive order I have issued. Signed, Donald J. Trump, the White House, January 5th, 2021.
Referred to the Committee on Foreign Affairs and ordered printed. Do I gavel out? Yep. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the House stands in recess until approximately 12:55 p.m.
Did we do this too early?
We had to, this is when we normally come in, and then we normally just wait for the Senate.
As the House comes to order for this important historic meeting, let us remind that each side, House and Senate, Democrats and Republicans, each have 11 members allowed to be present on the floor. Others may be in the gallery. This is at the guidance of the attending physician and the sergeants at arms. The gentleman on the Republican side of the aisle will please observe the social distancing and agree to what we have 11 members on each side so that we can responsibilities to this chamber, to this responsibility, and to this House of Representatives. Please exit the floor if you do not have an assigned role from your leadership. You can share with your staff if you want to have a few more, but you cannot be that close together, floor of the House, with that many people in here. And I thank the Senate and the Democrats for abiding by the rules. Let's go. Let's just start. Okay.
You guys ready?
You needed to. I know what we're going to do.
Madam Speaker and members of Congress, pursuant to the Constitution and the laws of the United States, the Senate and House of Representatives are meeting in joint session to verify the certificates and count the votes of the electors of the several states for President and Vice President of the United States. After ascertainment has been had that the certificates are authentic and correct in form, the tellers will count and make a list of the votes cast by the electors of the several states. The tellers on the part of the two houses have taken their places at the clerk's desk. Without objection, the tellers will dispense with the reading of the formal portions of the certificates. After ascertaining that the certificates are regular in form and authentic, the tellers will announce the votes cast by the electors for each state, beginning with Alabama, which the parliamentarians advise me is the only certificate of vote from that state and purports to be a return from the state, and that has annexed to it a certificate from an authority of that state purporting to appoint or ascertain electors. Mr. Blunt.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia seek recognition?
For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia rise?
Parliamentary inquiry, Mr. Vice President. In order to follow with the Speaker's instructions that only a limited number of people be on the floor, may I ask how one would make an objection or make a parliamentary inquiry in the future if you're not on the floor but in the gallery?
Of Title III of the United States Code, debate is not permitted in the joint session.
You want to hand that to
The parliamentary inquiry, Mr. Vice President. I am not attempting
Gentleman's
to debate.
recognized.
I'm not attempting to debate. I'm trying to find out how a parliamentary inquiry or a parliamentary point of order would be made in following with the Speaker's request that most of us not be on the floor. How do you make one of those points of order when you don't know what's going to happen later?
Respectfully,
Yes, sir.
the gentleman's parliamentary inquiry constitutes debate, which is not permitted in the joint session under Section 18 of Title III United States Code. With that, Mr. Blunt.
this mic on?
Yeah. Is my statement out?
Yes, sir, it is.
Thank you.
Try again. It's not on.
Mr. President, do you think this is on?
I don't believe it's on.
It's not on.
Try it one more time.
Is it working?
They think it is.
All right.
Okay.
You could ask what he wants to continue.
Are you ready?
Let's get orders going.
Want me to read it whether they can hear it or not?
They think it's working, so we'll try again. Okay, order.
Mr. President,
Order in the chamber.
Mr. President,
Gentlemen will continue.
the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of Alabama seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida received 9 votes for president, and Michael R. Pence of the state of Indiana received 9 votes for vice president.
Are there any objections to counting the certificate of vote of the state of Alabama that the teller has verified appears to be regular in form and authentic? Hearing none. This certificate from Alaska, the parliamentarians advise me, is the only certificate of vote from that state that purports to be a return from the state, and that has annexed to it a certificate from an authority of the state purporting to appoint and ascertain electors.
Mr. President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of Alaska seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida received 3 votes for president, and Michael R. Pence of the state of Indiana received 3 votes for vice president.
Are there any objections to counting the certificate of vote of the state of Alaska that the teller has verified appears to be regular in form and authentic?
If not, there are none. This certificate.
Hearing none. This certificate from Arizona, the parliamentarians advise me, is the only certificate of vote that the state purports to be a return from the state, and that has annexed to it a certificate from an authority of that state purporting to appoint or ascertain electors.
Mr. President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of Arizona seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Joseph R. Biden, Jr. of the state of Delaware received 11 votes for president, and Kamala D. Harris of the state of California received 11 votes for vice president.
Are there any objections to counting the certificate of vote of the state of Arizona that the teller has verified appears to be regular in form and authentic?
Mr. Vice President, I, Paul Gosar from Arizona.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Arizona rise?
I rise up for myself and 60 of my colleagues to object to the counting of the electoral ballots from Arizona.
Is the objection in writing and signed by a senator?
Yes, it is.
It is. An objection presented in writing and signed by both a representative and a senator complies with the law, Chapter 1 of Title 3 of the United States Code. The clerk will report the objection.
Objection to counting the electoral votes of the state of Arizona. We, a member of the House of Representatives and a United States Senator, object to the counting of the electoral votes of the state of Arizona on the ground that they were not, under all of the known circumstances, regularly given.
Are there further objections to the certificates from the state of Arizona? The chair hears none. The two houses will withdraw from joint session. Each house will deliberate separately on the pending objection and report its decision back to the joint session. The Senate will now retire to its chamber.
They are participating in debate and must wear a mask at all times, even when under recognition for debate. Members must also practice proper social distancing when present in the chamber. Let the record show that there is a gross violation of this guidance from the attendants on the Republican side of the aisle. Please, in the interest of your own health, and as an example to the American people, abide by the numbers, now up to 25 on each side of the aisle, to participate in this stage of the development, okay? Pursuant to Senate Concurrent Resolution 1, and Section 17 of Title III of the United States Code, when the two houses withdraw from the joint session to count the electoral vote for separate consideration of an objection, a representative may speak to the objection for 5 minutes and not more than once. Debate shall not exceed 2 hours, after which the chair will put in the question, shall the objection be agreed to? The clerk will report the objection made in the joint session.
Objection to counting the electoral votes of the state of Arizona. We, a member of the House of Representatives and a United States Senator, object to the counting of the electoral votes of the state of Arizona on the ground that they were not, under all of the known circumstances, regularly given. Signed, Paul Gosar, Representative, State of Arizona. Ted Cruz, Senator, State of Texas.
Thank you. The chair will endeavor to alternate recognition between members seeking support of the objection and members seeking opposition to the objection. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Scalise, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today to object to a number of states that did not follow the constitutional requirement for selecting electors. Madam Speaker, this is something that is clear that our founding fathers debated about as a fundamental decision of how we choose our president. There was a lot of back and forth, if anyone reads the founding documents of our country, about the different versions they went through to ultimately come up with a process where each state has elections, each state has a process for selecting their electors and sending them to Washington. And Madam Speaker, in a number of those states, that constitutional process was not followed, and that's why we're here to object. If you look at what the requirement says, nowhere in Article 2, Section 1 does it give the Secretary of State of a state that ability. Nowhere does it give the governor that ability. Nowhere does it give a court that ability. It exclusively gives that ability to the legislatures. And in fact, in most states, that's the process that was followed. But for those states that this wasn't followed, unfortunately, this is not new. We've seen over and over again more states where the Democrat Party has gone in and selectively gone around this process. That has to end, Madam Speaker. We have to follow the constitutional process. Now, there might be reasons why some people don't like the process laid out by a legislative body. Madam Speaker, I served on one of those legislative bodies when I was in the state legislature for 12 years. I served on the House and Governmental Affairs Committee where we wrote the laws for our state's elections. And I can tell you, when we had to make changes, those were extensively negotiated. We would have people on both sides come, Republicans and Democrats, Madam Speaker, would get together to work through those changes, any minute change, to how a precinct would function, to how a change would be made in the time of an election, signature requirements, all the many things that involve a clerk carrying out the duties in each parish, in our case. You would see people come and give testimony. Madam Speaker, both sides could come. Clerks of court were there in the hearing rooms. It was an open process, by the way, not behind closed doors in a smoke-filled room where somebody might want to bully a Secretary of State to get a different version that might benefit them or their party or their candidate. That's not what our founding fathers said is the process. Maybe it's how some people wanted to carry it out, but they laid out that process. And so when we would have to make those changes, they were in public view. They were heavily debated. And then ultimately, those laws were changed in advance of the election so everybody knew what the rules were. People on both sides knew how to play the rules before the game started, not getting somewhere in the process and saying, well, you don't think it's going to benefit you, so you try to go around the Constitution. That's not how our system works. It's gotten out of hand. And so President Trump has called this out. And President Trump has stood up to it. So many of us have stood up to it. And in fact, over 100 of my colleagues, Madam Speaker, asked the Supreme Court to address this problem just a few weeks ago. And unfortunately, the court chose to punt. They didn't answer it one way or the other. They didn't want to get in the middle of this discussion. We don't have that luxury today. We have to discuss this. We have to fix this. In fact, on our first full day of this Congress, many of us brought legislation onto the House floor to start fixing the problems with our elections, to restore integrity to the election process, which has been lost by so many millions of Americans. And we had a vote. Every single Republican voted to reform the process. Every single Democrat voted against it. They don't want to fix this problem. But the Constitution is our guide. And it's time we start following the Constitution. It's time we get back to what our founding fathers said is the process for selecting electors. That's the legislatures. In public view, not behind closed doors, not smoke-filled rooms, not bullying somebody that might give you a better ruling. Let's get back to rule of law and follow the Constitution, Madam Speaker, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentlewoman It's over now. I thought it was Jamie. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from California seek recognition?
To strike the last word.
Without objection, gentlewoman is recognized for
Madam
5
Speaker,
minutes.
Madam Speaker, this day marks a crossroads for American democracy. Those who object to the counting of the Electoral College votes, which reflect the votes of the American people, want to substitute their preferences for the voter's choice. That's not what our Constitution requires, and it's at odds with the American Democratic Republic. If Congress selects the next president instead of American voters, we'll have no need for an electoral college. In fact, we'd have no need for presidential elections at all. We'd be moving from a government elected by the people to a government selected by those already governing. That's not America. In the United States, we abide by the choices of the people, not an elite few. The framers of our Constitution considered whether to have Congress select the president and specifically rejected it. Instead, they wrote Article 2 and the 12th Amendment. Article 2 creates the Electoral College, where each state appoints electors. Laws of all 50 states and D.C. require electors to vote for the winner of the state's popular election. Each state provides for the orderly conduct of elections, including lawful challenges, recounts, and the like. The 12th Amendment is what brings us to today. It says the electors meet in their states. That happened December 14th. The amendment says the electors shall cast their votes, sign and certify them, transmit them to a seal. That's been done. The sealed envelopes containing the signed, certified ballots from each state's electors, reflecting the votes of the people, were in those mahogany boxes. The 12th Amendment directs the President, as the Vice President, as the President of the Senate, to do only this: open the sealed envelopes, and then the vote shall be counted. Simple. It doesn't say counted in a manner that some members of Congress or the Vice President might prefer. No. The votes are simply to be counted as certified and transmitted by the states. During Reconstruction after the Civil War, more than one slate of electors were appointed by states. Dueling lists were sent and protracted processes were undertaken in presidential elections. And as a result, to make an orderly process, Congress enacted the Electoral Count Act of 1887. This law governs our proceedings today. The act provides dispute resolution mechanisms. Under the ECA, if a governor certifies a slate of electors and there are no competing slates from that state, the governor's certified slate must be counted. Today, every single slate of electors, won by Joe Biden or won by Donald Trump, got their governor's certification. Not a single state submitted a competing slate. There's no dispute to resolve. The 2020 election was the most secure election conducted in modern history. Challenges were resolved by lawful recounts and audits. The result, Vice President Biden won the 2020 election. More than 60 lawsuits were filed contesting elements of the election process. None of these lawsuits prevailed. Why? As even President Trump's own judicial appointees ruled, there was no evidence of any wrongdoing that would change the outcome. The people spoke. It was not a close election. The margin of victory for Biden in 2020 was larger than Trump's margin in 2016. In fact, the Biden victory is one of the most decisive in modern times, exceeding the margin enjoyed by Reagan when he defeated Carter in 1980. Congress has gathered in joint session to count electoral votes every 4 years since 1789. I understand the disappointment people feel when their candidate for president loses. I've felt the same several times in my voting life. When that happens, it's not an invitation to upend the Constitution and the laws of the United States. It's an invitation to work with the new president for the good of the country and to wait for the next election in 4 years if you're dissatisfied. In that spirit, I urge my colleagues to uphold the American democracy and reject the objection, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Mr. President,
Senator.
we gathered together at a moment of great division, at a moment of great passion. We have seen, and no doubt will continue to see, a great deal of moralizing from both sides of the aisle. But I would urge to both sides perhaps a bit less certitude and a bit more recognition that we are gathered at a time when democracy is in crisis. Recent polling shows that 39% of Americans believe the election that just occurred, quote, was rigged. You may not agree with that assessment, but it is nonetheless a reality for nearly half the country. I would note it is not just Republicans who believe that. 31% of independents agree with that statement. 17% of Democrats believe the election was rigged. Even if you do not share that conviction, it is the responsibility, I believe, of this office to acknowledge that is a profound threat to this country and to the legitimacy of any administrations that will come in the future. I want to take a moment to speak to my Democratic colleagues. I understand your guy is winning right now. If Democrats vote as a bloc, Joe Biden will almost certainly be certified as the next president of the United States. I want to speak to the Republicans who are considering voting against these objections. I understand your concerns, but I urge you to pause and think. What does it say to the nearly half the country that believes this election was rigged if we vote not even to consider the claims of illegality and fraud in this election? And I believe there's a better way. The leaders just spoke about setting aside the election. Let me be clear, I am not arguing for setting aside the result of this election. All of us are faced with two choices, both of which are lousy. One choice is vote against the objection. And tens of millions of Americans will see a vote against the objection as a statement that voter fraud doesn't matter, isn't real, and shouldn't be taken seriously. And a great many of us don't believe that. On the other hand, most, if not all of us, believe we should not set aside the results of an election just because our candidate may not have prevailed. And so I endeavored to look for door number 3, a third option, and for that I looked to history, to the precedent of the 1876 election, the Hayes-Tilden election, where this Congress appointed an electoral commission to examine claims of voter fraud. 5 House members, 5 senators, 5 Supreme Court justices examined the evidence and rendered a judgment. And what I would urge of this body is that we do the same. That we appoint an electoral commission to conduct a 10-day emergency audit, consider the evidence, and resolve the claims. For those on the Democratic aisle who say there is no evidence, they've been rejected, then you should rest in comfort. If that's the case, an electoral commission would reject those claims. But for those who respect the voters, simply telling the voters, go jump in a lake, the fact that you have deep concerns is of no moment to us. That jeopardizes, I believe, the legitimacy of this and subsequent elections. The Constitution gives to Congress the responsibility this day to count the votes. The framers knew what they were doing when they gave responsibilities to Congress. We have a responsibility, and I would urge that we follow the precedent of 1877. The Electoral Count Act explicitly allows objections such as this one for votes that were not regularly given. And let me be clear, this objection is for the state of Arizona, but it is broader than that. It is an objection for all 6 of the contested states to have a credible, objective, impartial body hear the evidence and make a conclusive determination. That would benefit both sides. That would improve legitimacy of this election. And so let me urge my colleagues, all of us take our responsibility seriously. I would urge my colleagues, don't take perhaps the easy path, but instead act together, astonish the viewers, and act in a bipartisan sense to say we will have a credible and fair tribunal, consider the claims, consider the facts, consider the evidence, and make a conclusive determination whether and to what extent this election complied with the Constitution and with federal law.
Senator from Minnesota.
Mr. President, I first would like to say I appreciate the words of our leader, Senator Schumer, as well as Senator McConnell's call for a higher calling. January 6th is not typically a day of historical significance for our country. For centuries, this day is simply the day that we receive each state's certified electoral votes, and it has come and gone without much fanfare. In fact, this is only the 3rd time in 120 years that the Senate has gathered to debate an objection, and as Senator Cruz well knows, both times these objections were resoundingly defeated. The last time the vote was 74-1. Why? Because senators have long believed that they should not mess around with the will of the people. They have understood the words of our great former colleague John McCain from the state of Arizona, who once said that nothing in life is more liberating than to fight for a cause larger than yourself. In this case, my colleagues, our cause, despite our political differences, is to preserve our American democracy, to preserve our republic, because as someone once said long ago, it's a republic if you can keep it. Now, I appreciate all my Democratic and Republican colleagues who have joined our ranks of coup fighters, who have stood up for our democracy, who stand tall for our republic, and who believe in an ideal greater than ourselves, larger than our political parties. That ideal is America. And Senator Cruz, he knows this. On January 20th, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will be sworn in as President and Vice President of the United States. He knows that President-elect Biden won more votes than any president in history and more than 7 million more votes than President Trump. Despite the unfounded conspiracy theories Senator Cruz touts, he knows that high-ranking officials in President Trump's own Homeland Security Department have concluded that the 2020 election was, quote, the most secure in American history. And if he wants to improve the numbers in his own party that he just mentioned of people believing in our elections, maybe he should start consulting with them. Or maybe he should start consulting with former Attorney General Barr, who said that he has found no evidence of widespread fraud in the 2020 election. We don't have to go back to 1877, my colleagues. Senator Cruz knows that 80 judges, including conservative judges, including judges confirmed in this chamber, nominated by President Trump, has thrown out these lawsuits, calling them baseless, inadequate, and contrary both to the plain meaning of the constitutional text and common sense. And he knows that all 10 living defense secretaries, including both of Trump's defense secretaries, Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, William Cohen, he knows that all these leaders have come together to say that these scurrilous attacks on our democracy must stop, and we must allow for a peaceful transition of power. Senator Sinema will fill you in on the specific facts as to why this election was sound and true in Arizona, but a summary. President Trump received 1,661,686 votes in the state. President-elect Biden won 1,672,143 votes, meaning that he won the state by 10,457 votes. On November 30th, after Arizona's Republican governor, the Secretary of State, the Attorney General, and the conservative Chief Justice of the Arizona Supreme Court certified the results of the election, the governor actually said, "We do elections well here in Arizona. The system is strong." 8 post-election lawsuits brought in Arizona to challenge the results were dismissed by judges. 9 members of the House from Arizona were elected in the same election, including 4 Republicans. And colleagues, I did not see Senator Cruz over at their swearing-in in the House of Representatives last Sunday asking for an audit. He did not stop their swearing-in because there was no fraud. And he did not ask for an audit because we had a fair election. I will end with this. My friend Roy Blunt, my fellow Rules Committee leader, many years ago found a statue, a bust of a man at the top of a bookcase. He did research. He went to the historians, and all he could find out was that no one knew who this guy was, except that he was a cleric. Hence, the statue is called the Unknown Cleric. Now, at the time, our leaders thought this man important enough that they would warrant a statue for him. But today, no one knows who he is. Senator Blunt's message to school kids and senators alike that visit his office when he shows them the statue, what we do here is more important than who we are. Senators, what matters is not our futures, not our own short-term destinies. What matters is our democracy's destiny. Because I think many of us know that people will not know who we are 100 years from now or 200 years from now. But what they will know is this. They will know what we did today, how we voted today, and that is more important than who we are. It's a republic if we can keep it. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Louisiana seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I rise in support of the objection.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Madam Speaker, we have a solemn responsibility today. We must vote to sustain objections to states of electors submitted by states that we genuinely believe clearly violated the Constitution and the presidential election of 2020. This is the threshold legal question before us, and it's an issue before us for the state of Arizona. We got to repeat this for emphasis because a lot of people seem to be confused. Because judges and not the state legislature changed the rules of the election, Arizona clearly violated the plain language of Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution in its selection of presidential electors. The framers of our Constitution recognized that elections were susceptible to corruption. We all know that. So how did they fix it? How did they provide for that? They created the Electoral College as a safeguard, and they expressly empowered state legislatures to ensure the integrity of our unique election system. Only the state legislatures, because they're a full body of representatives and not rogue officials, were given the authority to direct the manner of appointing presidential electors because it was so important. The Supreme Court has acknowledged this over and over. They previously affirmed in Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2, quote, "The appointment of these electors is thus placed absolutely and wholly with the legislatures of the several states. That authority can never be taken away or abdicated." The Arizona legislature did enact detailed rules and procedures that state was determined and was supposed to follow to choose its electors. But in the months preceding the 2020 election, as we've heard, and by the way, 1,000 pages of evidence have just been submitted on the facts on this, those well-established rules and procedures were deliberately changed. They weren't changed by the legislature, friends. They were changed by judges. And those actions taken by the judiciary were not limited to mere interpretations of existing law. No, they were substantive, wholesale changes to those statutes. That's a usurpation of the authority that the legislature had. That usurpation was repeated across the country this year. It's the primary reason. It's one of the reasons why the election of 2020 became riddled with an unprecedented number of serious allegations of fraud and irregularities all over the country. National polls, as has been said, indicate that a huge percentage of Americans now have serious doubts about not just the outcome of this presidential contest, but also the future reliability of our election system itself. Since we are convinced that the election laws in Arizona and some other key states were changed in this unconstitutional manner, we have a responsibility today. The slates of electors produced under those modified laws are thus unconstitutional. They are, quote, not regularly given or lawfully certified as required by the Electoral Count Act, and they're invalid on their face. That's just the
Minister, the senator from Oklahoma, Senator Lankford.
Senator from Oklahoma.
Mr. President, in America, we settle our differences in elections. What happens if you don't trust the election count, or you're concerned that so many courts denied or dismissed cases within hours after they were given thousands of pages of evidence? The reason we have a Congress to settle our nation's divisions and the rules of the Senate make sure that every opinion in the nation is heard is so issues like this can be addressed. The constitutional crisis in our country right now is that millions of Americans are being told to sit down and shut up. Their opinions matter. During the electoral challenge on January the 6th, 2005, Senator Ted Kennedy stood on this floor and said this. He said, "I commend the many thousands of citizens in Massachusetts and other states who insisted on treating today's electoral vote count in Congress as a meaningless ritual would be an insult to our democracy unless we register our own protest against the obviously flawed voting process that took place in so many states. We are hopeful," he said, "that this major issue that goes to the heart of our democracy is now firmly implanted on the agenda for effective action by Congress." End quote. I agree. The United States Constitution does not allow me to assign different electors to a state, nor should it. The United States Constitution does not give the option to the Vice President of the United States to just unilaterally decide which states are in and out, and it should not. Each state decides its electors through its people. But a small group of senators, including myself, have demanded that we not ignore the questions that millions of people are asking in our nation. So we have proposed a constitutional solution. Pause the count. Get more facts to the states before January the 20th. We proposed a 15-member commission, just like what was done after the failed election of 1876. We're encouraging people to spend 10 days going through all the issues so states can have one last opportunity to address any challenges. Then the states, as the Constitution directs, would make the final decision on their electors. I have some colleagues who have said that a 10-day commission is not enough time. So they have counter-proposed, just ignoring the lingering questions. We need to do something. My challenge today is not about the good people of Arizona.
And it will stand in recess until the call of the chair.
We'll pause.
Protesters are in the building.
Thank you.
There wasn't anything you said.
For 5 minutes.
Madam Speaker, I filed my petition, a challenge on the slate of electors from the state of Arizona that was actually put forward by Governor Ducey of Arizona. My ask to you, the Speaker, to the Vice President, is simple. Do not count these electors until and unless the Secretary of State allows a forensic audit of the election, a request she has denied repeatedly. We have been told over and over that even though this was a public election, using public money on public machines, utilizing public employees, the public today has no ability to simply double-check the veracity of these results. If the presidential election was a football game, we would get a slow-motion review from multiple angles and a correction of a controversial decision. But not so, we are told by our Secretary of State for the presidential election. No review for you. No access to the Dominion voting machines with a documented history of enabling fraud through its now discredited adjudication system, a system that literally allows one person to change tens of thousands of votes in a mere minutes. In the only audit done in Arizona, a court found 3% error rate against President Trump. Vice President Biden's margin of error was 1/10 of that, at 0.03%. By the way, a 3% error rate at minimum is 90,000 ballots. After finding the 3% error rate, the court stopped the audit and refused to go further. In Arizona, as my attachments make clear, mail-in ballots were altered on the first day of counting, as shown in data graphs we provide, and is concluded by data analysts. Over 400,000 mail-in ballots were altered, switched from President Trump to Vice President Biden, or completely erased from President Trump's totals. The proof is in the counting curves, the curves that cannot occur except with odds so rare and unlikely that winning the Mega Millions lottery is more probable. Mr. Speaker, can I have order in the chamber?
The House will be in order. The House will be in order. Okay. The House will be in order. House will be in order. Members will take their seats. The House will be in order. Okay. Okay. We can get order. We can resume.
House will be in order. We need order in the House so we can proceed. The gentleman from Arizona has 2 3/4 minutes remaining. Okay. The gentleman may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I was saying, the probability of these ectopic curves, you have the better likelihood of winning the Mega Million lottery than you do having statistical issues here. Over 30,000 illegal aliens voted in Arizona using the federal ballot. Yet our Secretary of State refused the public access to review the ballots. Over 1,000 residences were visited for proof of residency and address. 456 failed that test. They were vacant lots. Even the recorder's office used as addresses. What are they hiding? If the process was fair, these would be improbable. These would be once-in-a-lifetime type applications. So let's look at the ballots, the signatures, and the adjudicated records. Until this is done, Mr. Speaker, we should not count this slate. You have a letter from the Arizona legislators stating its intent to review the issue on January 11th. Our governor has refused to allow the state to properly convene to do its proper oversight. Madam Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I ask you one question today. Are you a ceremonial figurehead in your current role, or did the drafters of the 12th Amendment and Congress in the Electoral Count Act of 1887 envision a role where you made discretionary decisions about ballot fraud and fair elections? If you were merely ceremonial, then let's be done with this. Let's eat our tea and crumpets and witness our national decline. But if you're not merely a ceremonial but vested with discernment, rationality, and legal authority to not just count from 1 to 270, then do not accept Arizona's electors as certified. Remand the slate back to the Secretary of State, back to the governor with the following instructions. Until a full, complete electoral forensic audit is allowed by the Secretary of State, the electors currently certified will not be counted. It will then fall on the state of Arizona to decide, does its electors, are they in the game or not? Anything less is an abdication of our Constitution, our republic, and our ethos. One man, one vote. We ask why? What is there to hide? Shouldn't the lawful victor of an election be proud, open, transparent about an election audit? I would. Instead, we're met with denials, cover-ups, and contempt of subpoenas. There's too much evidence of fraud demonstrated by statistical anomalies that experts have determined cannot happen in the absence of fraud to accept such a slate. I'm not asking these electors never be counted. It's just that they need to be certified the proper way. Our beloved Constitution is but a mere piece of paper if we do not follow the law, upholding the law. But now, alas, we find ourselves lawless, destroying the very thread that binds us together. But we need to get back to the rule of law. That is what has been violated, truly, by the actions in these states.
Thank you.
With that, I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. Without objection, the House is going to go back into recess. so we get an update. So I need everybody's attention.
Get down under your chairs if necessary, so we have folks entering the rotunda and coming down this way. So we'll update you as soon as we can, but just be prepared. Stay calm.
In their states.
So the president has been calling on the vice president to take some sort of stand. What do you make of this?
Yeah, I think one of the things that the vice president can do, because there's not a lot of precedent on this. You go back to 1877 where there was a lot of things that were going on, but there's not a lot of case law to be able to flush out what his real responsibilities can be as the vice president. But one of the things that I think he has clear jurisdiction to do is in the states that have competing electors, send back instructions to those states, to those state legislatures, which under the Constitution have the power to have the time, manner, and prescribe the electors and appoint the electors, for them to be able to come to an agreement on the electors when they've sent competing electors and deal with some of the problems that we've seen in some of these states. Yesterday, there was a Wisconsin representative who filed a resolution that laid out specific instances where Wisconsin law had been violated in violation of what the legislature had put in place. This is a clear violation of the Constitution. And so one of the things I think he can do is push it back to those states that have competing electors and say, look, you have the right under the Constitution to determine this. Please send us a clean slate of electors, figure out the issues that you had clear violations of in your state, and send me back new electors, and then see what the state legislatures in those states do.
So, and what do you think the likelihood of this scenario is?
I don't know. That scenario is completely up to the vice president. I think it's clear that Republicans don't have the majority in the House chamber. And even if we had a slim majority in the House chamber, not all the Republicans agree about the constitutional issues going on here and objecting to the Electoral College. So I think as far as the House votes, we're not going to be successful on that, but I do think there are things that the vice president can do. It'll be interesting to see what he's going to do. He hasn't talked about specifically the direction he's going to take, and looking forward to being a part of history today.
And I think the Pennsylvania legislature is actually calling for him to take, is it 10 days leave or somehow order that. Do you know anything about this?
Some of the articles that I've read as of this morning, there was like 88 different legislators in these different states that are calling on him to delay the certification for 10 days and then call a new joint session of Congress so that those individual states can kind of flush out some of these competing electors.
So, our viewership here might be guessing that you have a bit of a legal background with everything that you've been talking about. I know you've been vocal about this call that was leaked, the Secretary of State speaking with the President. There's been all sorts of buzz about what the implications of that call are, what it actually meant. Tell me your perspective.
Well, first of all, the mainstream media and the left are immediately going to call for impeachment and all these different things, just like they did for the Russia collusion hoax for 3 years, which was a complete and utter lie and a fraud on our country. But this was a conversation, private conversation between the President and the Secretary of State about ongoing litigation, the purpose of which was to try to resolve some of these legal issues of lawsuits that have been filed in Georgia. And we heard direct from Trump's lawyer that said this violated the confidentiality of the conversation and the effort to try to resolve some of these legal disputes on ongoing litigation. I was a litigator my entire time as a lawyer in Florida. I've been a lawyer for over 15 years, and you can't violate confidentiality when you're trying to resolve a case. That's very clear. You can get disbarred for it. And I think Obviously, this was 100% purely political on behalf of the Secretary of State or whoever it was that made this recording public. It should have never been recorded to begin with. And I think it's, again, the constant attacks that this president had to withstand for the last 4 years.
So do you think the way this last election played out is a reflection of these attacks as well?
I do, and if you look at in the states that we've had all of the problems, again, these are states that usurp the will of the legislature by allowing things like unverified mail-in ballots, which you don't know who they came from. You don't know if they're electors of those individual states or if they're even qualified to vote in those individual states, and that's hugely problematic, one, for fair and free elections in our country, and two, for the individual legislatures that have created law and for individual elected officials to just completely usurp the will of these individual state legislatures.
So, you know, we had yesterday a big election in Georgia, the runoffs. Do they have any implication on what's going to happen today or the decisions people will be making today, in your opinion?
Yeah, again, same thing. You saw Republican counties by like 9:30, 10 o'clock, 99% of the precincts reporting. In these democratically run bigger counties, like 30% precincts reporting by 10 o'clock. And suddenly over the night, hundreds of thousands of ballots came. And again, because they can accept mail-in ballots that are non-verified and you have no idea who these people are or if there even are people or if they're, like we saw video before, pulling suitcases of ballots and counting them that weren't actually real ballots, is hugely problematic to our country, to our republic, and hugely problematic to the people that went out and vote that are qualified voters in the state of Georgia.
You know, in Georgia, there were, you know, after the presidential election or the original election, I guess, there were all sorts of concerns and changes that were requested, but not many of the changes were actually implemented. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the Georgia governor refused the legislature's call to have a special session. In Florida, the Speaker and the Senate President have the ability to call a special session. That's what would have occurred in Florida if we would have identified issues that needed to be addressed before the next election. You could have called a special session, addressed them, and the governor in Georgia refused to do that. And I think that's going to come back and be something that the voters of Georgia, especially Republican voters of Georgia, is going to remember in his next reelection, because he had an obligation to the citizens of that state to ensure that they had free and fair elections. He had the legislators calling for a special session. Why wouldn't you do that and fix the problems that you have? And again, the will of the legislature of these states is paramount in the Constitution.
So the president just recently today said that this particular the presidential election, the outcome is even more important now that the Georgia results have been coming in. Your thoughts?
Yeah, you're going to see our country violently lurch to the left, to the radical leftist progressive agenda, because there will be nothing stopping them. You know, we had Mitch McConnell in the Senate that was stopping all of the leftist progressive radical left legislation coming out from the House, stopping it in the Senate. You even see Democratic members of the House tweeting that now they can get done all these radical things they tried to get through the House will now go through the Senate, because if 50 Republicans vote no and 50 Democrats vote yes, Kamala Harris would be the tiebreak. And it's going to go to Joe Biden, and he's going to sign these bills. So over the next 2 years, you're going to see a violent lurch to the left. And that's not where the American people is. That's not where the majority of Americans are. They don't want to defund the police, Green New Deal, Medicare for all. They don't want these things. And that's what's going to end up happening in the next 2 years.
Any final thoughts?
Just thank you guys for what you do, and it's an honor to serve the citizens of the 17th District of Florida.
I'm here with Congressman Mike Kelly of Pennsylvania. Congressman Kelly, great to speak with you.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
Well, you know, Pennsylvania, I've been wanting to speak with someone from Pennsylvania pretty urgently because, of course, the state legislature is now requesting more time to basically look at this whole question of electors. Tell me about that.
Well, I think they recognize, they being the state legislature, that back in October of 2019, they made a huge mistake, and that's they changed our voting laws without doing an amendment, which would have been the proper way to do it. They just went ahead and changed our voting process, allowing the no excuse mail-in ballots, and they're now saying, wait a minute, that was a huge mistake. Let's take a look at it. And there's been so many irregularities that's taken place right across the board. They say, give us a little more time, let's investigate it. Let's make sure that what we're doing today doesn't forever give people get the point that they're not going to have any faith or trust in the system. So they say, let's stop now. Let's look at it so we can give our residents, our citizens, the opportunity to see that we're serious about this and we're going to make sure that was done the right way and that every legitimate vote got counted.
Are you in communication with any of the state members, and what are they telling you, if so?
You know what? I have a lot of friends serving the state legislature, and obviously, why wouldn't we? Because we share a lot of the same constituents. I think what they're saying is there was a mistake made in Pennsylvania. And then to top it off, in addition to changing the voting process, then after that, our governor says, look, so the times, the places, and the manners in which that we do elections, our governor said, look, having a counter signature on the ballot, we don't have to worry about that. In fact, November 3rd at 8 o'clock is the end of our vote taking. Well, we're going to go to that next Friday and make sure that we get a chance to get all these things in. What about if they're not postmarked, sir, if they don't fall within that range? Well, we're going to forget that. And then then we need to have people in watching as the ballots get counted. In some places, no, we weren't able to even get in. In another instance, beforehand, some of the votes that were brought in, the mail-in ballots, people were called and said, you need to come in and cure your ballot. I think you made a mistake on the way you voted. Those ballots weren't even supposed to be opened until November the 3rd. So there's a lot of inconsistencies and irregularities, and I think it's time to step back and do something that would restore the faith and confidence and the trust that the people in Pennsylvania and the rest of America has to have in our process of electing officials.
So presumably you're here working on behalf of your Pennsylvania legislators, yes. And I'm guessing you're intending to object from what you're saying. And so, what is the best case scenario for them and for you?
I think that what we're looking at is a lot of different things. The part that I have is the unconstitutionality of Act 77. I think what we're looking for today, though, also is let's take a timeout. Let's take 10 days to really do a deeper dive to take a look at this. If there's anything that we can do today to help restore the faith and the confidence that the people have, then now's the time to do it. It's not going to cause a problem in the operation of the country. Nothing's going to stop moving. We're still going to be well funded. But what we really have to make sure of, do we have the faith and confidence and trust of the American people? I'm a representative. I represent 705,687 people in Pennsylvania's 16th Congressional District. I have an obligation to them to fulfill my oath of office, which is to support and defend our Constitution. My goodness, if we can't do that, and if we can't take time out to do that, then what do we say to that 1.5 million Americans in uniform that died to protect this Constitution? It's the least we can do. It's not that much time, but it's going to mean so much to the American people.
Well, and so maybe tell me a little more. There's a lot of complicated ideas about what the procedures might look like. Tell me, how do you imagine that you could accomplish getting these 10 days?
Do you know what? I'm not sure that I by myself can do something. I think that when people look at the total amount of information that's going to be put out today and the questions about the irregularities, people are going to say, you know what, let's take a look. Now, you're going to have people with different views of how the Constitution, how it should be interpreted, and this side's going to have an opinion, this side's going to have an opinion. At the end of the day, the most important opinion is that of the American people. And that's what I say to people all the time. Look, you elected me to come and represent you. You didn't have to vote for me. You don't have to be a Republican. You don't have to be a Democrat. All you have to do is be a registered American voter. And that's my job. So I find it as an easy thing to do, and it's part of my oath of office. So if oaths don't mean anything, and if our Constitution doesn't mean anything, then our country as whole is like, well, no, that's not the compass we follow. We're very strict about the way we should run things. The only place in the world that you have this ability to do this. So I really appreciate the opportunity to come and represent the district.
One more question. We've been watching the Georgia election, the runoffs, and I'm wondering if you think what we know now will have any impact on how this joint session will go today.
Well, the way it looks right now, no, I don't know. Was there a concession with Ms. Loeffler? I don't know that she's conceded.
I'm not aware.
And I think with Senator Perdue, they're still saying it's too close to call. Look, it does have implications going forward. If we have a 50-50 Senate, then if there's a tie, the tiebreaker is the Vice President of the United States. So that would be Ms. Harris if they are in fact sworn in on the 20th. So it really throws everything out of balance. We're in the minority. The Democrats are in the majority in the House. They'll be in the majority in the Senate. And we'll have possibly Joe Biden as our president. So they could pretty much run the table and do anything they want, and we can sit back and say we don't agree with you, and they say, you know what, if you had more votes, we'd listen to you, but you don't.
Overall for you, you said you're hoping to get these 10 days. Is there any other scenarios that you would be supporting today?
Do you know what? I don't know of any other ones. I know this is what we're talking about today, and I keep getting variations of people call me up or they text me and they say, hey, I think you can do this, hey, I think you can do that. And I'll say, you know what? We've got rules that we stay within. Look, it may not end the way I would have liked it to end, but as long as it ends constitutionally and within the boundaries of what we're set up and what our founders have set up, I'm fine with it.
Well, so tell me about what you expect to be doing today.
Well, at 1 o'clock today, there's the culmination of the presidential election. Not just this year, but every year, the culmination of the presidential election is in accordance with the 12th Amendment. So the Vice President presides over a joint session, House and Senate, and you unseal the results of the Electoral College, which is, of course, the result of the November election.
So, and I understand, of course, that you're one of the people that intends to object. I actually am curious in a particular state. I don't know what your plan is. Can you tell us?
Yeah, so there's a healthy debate between whether the Constitution says the 12th Amendment permits objections or not. Well, the history shows there are objections. Frankly, even the second president, there was an objection. Thomas Jefferson was president instead of Aaron Burr because there was an objection. And then you go on all along the way. The precedent is that there are objections, and they've been rare that there's an outcome change, and no one expects that there's going to be an outcome change here, because even if 100% of Republicans voted to object to, say, the electors of Pennsylvania, no Democrat is likely to object, and Democrats control the majority of the House, right? So, and we know also that Republicans aren't united in this, and some for really principled reasons. They believe in a plain reading of Article 2 of the Constitution that this is really 100% up to the states. They send whomever they like, and your job is to simply open that up and accept what they do. I don't think that's the case, because no state is so sovereign that they can deprive their citizens of equal protection of the laws, the principle of one person, one vote. And that's a big part of why I'm objecting, because there's question as to whether that's happened, whether in a legal way, like Nevada, where they changed their laws right before the election, they made their laws that way, or in a practice. So if you look at Wisconsin, they have really good voter ID laws, but the practice was that they ignored those laws. And then one of the states that has been highlighted, that in the audit trail, you should also be able to prove that you have protected one person, one vote, and that you really had a secure election and equal protection of the laws for everyone.
So a lot of talk has been around what the Vice President might do. Do you have any thoughts on what he might do?
Well, I think the Vice President will simply open the ballots, and it'll be up to Congress to object. There are people pushing that the Vice President could deem, whatever he wants from the chair. And Louis Gohmert, one of my colleagues in the House, even filed a lawsuit to try to make it so it was clear in the law that that was all power given to the Vice President. And I do not believe that the Constitution gives the power to whoever presides over that joint session to decide whatever they want, and then it's up to the members of the House and Senate to object to whatever the Vice President decrees. It says the Electoral College results are conveyed to
what are you thinking?
Well, right now, if the results were locked in and this is the result, you'd have two Democrat senators from Georgia. And it's certainly not historically, uncommon for Georgia to have two Democratic senators, but it is a big shift in the current political landscape and hugely consequential for control of the Senate. Democrats have said that they would do all sorts of things if they had control of the Senate. And so really we're looking to Joe Manchin to deliver on what he said is to not end the filibuster rule, to make it so the 60 votes do matter in the Senate, not a simple majority. And the market is reacting. They're basically saying, well, brace yourselves.
A lot. So
What would happen in this sort of scenario? Tell me more.
Well, so if you go back to September of 2019, we had the best economy in a generation or more. And the Keynesians say, look, in times of trouble, it's important to spend money. And we've done that this year. We spent $5.2 trillion for, COVID relief because it's unprecedented, virus. You have to do that. There's times our country spent a lot for wars. But that's why in times of abundance, then you save. No one does that part of the Keynesian idea anymore. And in times of abundance, like September of 2019 when we were voting on a budget, Plan A was to spend $1.1 trillion more than we had. And so there really isn't a consensus to do anything about that. And the fear that's showing up in the market today, whether that's the rise of the S&P 500, the rise of real estate, marketable securities across the board, Bitcoin, you name it, people are saying we have to get out of cash because the value of the dollar is being destroyed by all this printed money.
5.2 trillion. When you say that, I can't even fathom what that is.
I mean, it's more than a year of spending for the entire federal government. So we spend less than $5 trillion for normal operation of the government. Social Security, Medicare, all the social safety net programs, Department of Defense, highways, you name it. We spend less than $5 trillion in a year. Just for COVID relief, we've spent more than that.
Incredible. Any final thoughts?
No, I really hope as people gather here today to make their voices heard, that everyone does it peaceably. That's what the First Amendment protects, the right to assemble peaceably. So I hope that's the case. There's a lot of passion, and the passion's well-deserved and well-merited. I just hope it stays peaceful.
On a beautiful Washington, D.C. morning where, I don't know, what would you say, 500,000 people? At least 500,000 people. If you want to just pan this way, look at this unbelievable sea of all types of flags, mostly American. Oh my God, from almost every state. We've been talking to people for the last few hours, people from every state, West Virginia, Texas. Where are you from?
I'm from Florida.
Wow, Florida. I went to school in Florida.
Amen. Not a woman. Amen.
Amen to that. What brings you out here today?
President Trump, we need to stop the steal.
Wow, what do you think of the election thus far?
I think it's not okay, and I have many choice bad words.
One more question. Did you vote?
Yes, I did.
How many times?
One time for Trump.
See, how are you going to win like this?
I needed more votes. They only gave me one, though, they said.
Yikes. Yeah, so at about 1 o'clock today, the joint session of Congress is going to start over in over in the Capitol building, where Pence is going to be presiding over a joint session of Congress, both the Senate and the House, where they're going to be going through the electoral votes and counting them to certify the 2020 presidential election. Normally, it's a very simple procedure, it's just basically ceremonial. But this time, there's basically 7 states that have what are known as dueling electors, where 2 slates of electors sent in their votes, one for President Trump, the other for Joe Biden. And some people are saying that Joe Biden might have the power to decide to count one rather than the other. So we'll see what actually happens. But there's so many people here, let's go chat with them.
Hi, sir. Can I ask you a few questions?
Sure.
Sure. So, where'd you travel from today?
From Pleasant Garden, North Carolina.
Oh, wow. Did it take you long?
It took me 5 hours.
Why do you feel so strongly about coming down?
Because I've written a lot of stuff for President Trump.
Oh.
Yep. So I'm Claude Allen Davis Jr. So we're hoping that, through prayer, and I was up here with, just like this, with Franklin Graham and Jonathan Kahn, when we had the prayer service at November the 26th. So I've been with them every step of the way, so here we are today, and we're hoping that we can get this thing turned around, which we will.
And we've seen many people of faith here at the rally today. Where is the...
me, the biggest thing, there's a reason why our ancestors, I believe that with our Father and with our ancestors, that there's a reason for one nation under God. There's a reason for why we trust, in God we trust. And if we do those 2 things, then God will bless America. I think I was one of the few in 2016, and President Trump has been the best president we've ever had. I mean, you know, you can see it. I look at it that his work speaks, and there's a certain character to that or so in the way, you know, and I think that he was meant to be, he was chosen. So, and for this time, and you can see there's been a lot of prophetic things that have happened along the way through, you know, during his administration. I mean, currently we're all watching right now, we're real close, you know, the peace, you know, the Trump peace plan, you know, that's starting to roll, you know, and that's starting to flourish. And I feel that, you know, there's a lot of things that our country, because we're ancestors, you know, through Israel, and or at least that's my belief. And a lot of things are parallel between our country and Israel, and that I'm hoping that, you know, well, I don't want to really say some of the things that I would like to say, you know, but there's some things, though, I mean, you know, that we wrestle with now. I do. I'm in Scripture all the time or so, you know, with America or so, and we're through, you know, we're right at the cusp, you know, at the end of the 5th Trump. So if you read your Bible, you know, we got the 6th Trump and the 7th Trump to go through. So, I mean, we're waiting for Jesus at the 7th Trump. So, you know, but we've got to get through the 6th Trump. So I just believe that this is the leader that could get us at least through that period. And that's really, I mean, other than that, I mean, you know, I mean, you can see, I mean, you know, when we grew up, or at least my generation or so, and I think when I said, you know, it took all of my strength when I wrote. I mean, I think a lot of the stuff that I wrote was the Lord, you know, using, you know, or speaking through. That's how I look at it.
Listen to this.
USA! 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 USA!
Wow. Okay. Can I ask? Thank you very much. What brings you out here today?
Well, I'm here to stand for the United States, for the U.S. Constitution.
Declined to hear the Texas case.
I'm very betrayed. I don't know what the motivation was for that, but irregardless, we're going to keep pressing on. Every branch failed us. You know, there's a lot of those congressional members that owe their seat to Donald Trump because it's clear, the circumstantial evidence is clear. There was a landslide, and they were brought along with that landslide. Now's their time to pony up. They need to do what's right today.
Wow.
So.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
super strong words. So I was
Where did you guys come from?
So I came from South Bend. Indiana. I came from Miami, Florida, but I'm from Milwaukee,